28 years later, The Bone Temple was recently released, and over the weekend, I just haven't been able to stop thinking about just how good it was. The first movie was a great revisit to the franchise, but after I watched it, I remember thinking that there were just quite a few things wrong with it. However, with this one, I just can't fault it in the slightest. From the performances by Ralph Fiennes and Jack O Connell, the direction that Garland decided to take the story in, and the on-screen direction from Nia DaCosta, from start to finish, I was glued to the screen. And in this video, I wanted to share exactly why I couldn't take my eyes off of it, and why it got a 5-star rating from me. So let's get into it. Here is why 28 years later The Bone Temple is perfect. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The direction the story went in. This is something that was crucial to get right when it came to justifying the need for there to be another movie so soon after the first one was released, and the change in direction of the story is something that I think helped it massively. Now, I loved the fact that this was a much more intimate story where we got to learn more about the isolating element of living in a world with the rage virus. People were out there just trying to survive on their own. There were people out there exploiting that and being far more threatening than the infected. People just doing what they could because they lacked that sense of belonging, and there was an overwhelming sense of loneliness too. In the first movie, there was a lot of running away from the infected, and we saw the different stages of the rage virus, and we also saw how threatening the world now was with the rage virus having plagued it. However, in this movie, with regards to the infected, we only really focused on Samson, the Alpha, which was an interesting move to make, and through him and Dr. Kelson, we saw how the virus didn't take over the brain, but instead how it caused a cloud to cover it, which could actually be healed. This groundbreaking revolution quite literally changes the story forever, because we saw that the infected could actually be cured. I also thought that by having a point of view shot from the perspective of Samson early on in the movie, it allowed us to truly understand what the infected were seeing regular humans as, and that they attacked because they thought regular humans were essentially monsters. The fact that there was a cure, and also the fact that we could see through the eyes of them and hear how all of their senses were driving them to this madness, was a great choice. I also loved the decision to have Jimmy Crystal being this character that induced more fear than the infected. It almost took the movie back to its roots and showed how humans, no matter what situation they're in, they can often be the ones that cause the most damage and will find a way of making suffering even worse. Jimmy wasn't only going around and giving charity, as he called it, to anybody that he came across, but he also didn't care about his fingers either. They looked up to him, which he loved, and he essentially just used them as pawns by feeding them his dark views and beliefs and giving them a sense of belonging. This is until somebody better came along in his eyes and could replace one of his fingers. It reminds me of Major Henry West from 28 Days Later, and how the likes of Jim, Selena and Hannah weren't safe when with their own kind because he was actually far more dangerous than the infected. This was the case with Jimmy too. It's a direction that simply provides deeper thought and meaning to the story, rather than just having people running away from zombies. Jimmy showed many signs of being a psychopath, such as hearing voices and believing that Old Nick, the devil, was talking to him directly. So the parallels between him being like that and the rage virus actually being a virus that causes psychopathic traits and is treated with medication that would be given to somebody with those symptoms was a really powerful incorporation as well. Dr. Kelson and Samson's relationship was another element of the story that I also really enjoyed watching unfold. There was a real hole in Kelson's life, which was the loneliness that he had and the fact that he mourned his life before, something which was subtly shown to us with the photos in his shelter. As the movie went on, it became clear to see that even though Samson was his test subject, he eventually became more to him than that. He became a companion, somebody who he was confiding in and actually speaking with when he had nobody else. The level of care that Kelson had, and it then flipping at the end when Samson was cured and he thanked Kelson as he took his last breath, it was actually quite an emotional moment. That's something that surprised me a lot, the fact that I was actually feeling emotional when watching this one. There was nothing like that at all in the first 28 Years Later movie, so it took me by surprise, and I absolutely loved it. Going for a more intimate approach allowed us to spend more time with the characters within the environment, operating their usual day-to-day, rather than just watching them trying to survive whilst evading infected. This felt like an actual story where deeper themes were explored, so I preferred it so much more to the first one. The powerful ending. The ending was something that just made my stomach drop. It was so bleak. Kelson being killed was sad enough, but when he saw Samson in a fully cured state and he drew his final breath, when the camera then moved up to a bird's eye view of the environment where the circle of fire was surrounding the bone temple, to me it symbolized that the creator of the cure to the virus that quite literally destroyed civilization was going to live and die inside of that circle and go no further than that. He literally had the key to saving civilization, and the brutality of him being killed right when he found out that he did it was devastating. It was one of those endings where you just felt empty inside. They were so close, but so far. It wasn't a happy ending at all. It had elements of sadness within it, but my stomach just dropping and knowing that the knowledge of the cure was now gone is something that I just couldn't help but keep thinking about. If we're talking about the ending, then we have to discuss that final Cillian Murphy scene too. It was rumoured that he was going to have a small appearance in the Bone Temple, so I was waiting for it to cut to him at some point. Having it right at the end was the perfect placement, and in seeing Spike and Kelly running away from infected right by his house, leading them to him, it felt like the perfect way of bridging this sequel all the way back to the very first installment in 2002. It laid down the foundations well for the third and final movie in the trilogy, and I think not only are we going to see Jim working with Spike and Kelly, but we'll see Spike's father and the immune baby most likely coming back into the picture too. I also can't wait to see what Samson's going to be like in the third movie. The performances. This movie was genuinely carried by 3 strong performances. The first was the performance of Samson and the weird traces of emotion that you could often get by his opioid-induced face, but most specifically, it was Jack O Connell and Ralph Fiennes as Jimmy Crystal and Dr Ian Kelson. I think it's testament to both of their acting abilities when the strongest scene in the entirety of the movie came from when they shared the screen together for the first time. Let's start with Jack O Connell. I said this in my review of the movie, but he's clearly showing us why he's one of Britain's finest acting talents at the moment. The performance that he gave in this movie was just utterly frightening. The lust that the character had for causing pain and terror when he could quite literally just choose to walk away was horrifying. That scene where all of those people were being flayed in the barn and he was just looking on and watching it, or the one during the opening scene in the pool when he didn't care in the slightest that one of his followers was dying right in front of him. He was severely mentally ill, and the psychopathic nature that the character had was not only at the forefront of the character, but it was ingrained within the core of it too. As much as he was frightening, I also thought on the other side, where we first saw him walk inside the Bone Temple, there was an uncertainty that was within his mind, and we saw the slightest bit of fear present itself. That was the first time we'd seen him exhibit something like that, and I thought it was handled really well. Then, during the ending where he was begging for his mother on the upside-down cross, now in a position that had put many others in throughout the entirety of his reign of terror, you brought the emotion and the helplessness. The range and conviction was just spot on. Then, with Ralph Fiennes, this was another performance that just captivated me and had me hanging on the end of every sentence. The emptiness that he felt, but the camaraderie that he had within an infected alpha that couldn't utter a word, was something that I just bought into completely. There was a sadness in Kelson's eyes and tone that almost sounded as if he'd reached his limit with life, and when it came to the ending, you could see that that truly was the case. Kelson served as the opposite to Jimmy. Jimmy offered death, whilst Kelson stood for life and hope in the work that he did, the angel and the devil. The performance that Kelson also put on when pretending that he was Old Nick was humorous and exciting, and despite it being something that could have been cheesy and over the top, it just worked so well because of Fiennes' conviction and delivery. The scene where the both of them were talking to one another and Jimmy tried to inflict fear into Kelson, a man that had come face to face with creatures far more intimidating than Jimmy Crystal, was one of my favourite scenes. The tension was fierce, and the almost sarcasm that was laced into every sentence that Kelson responded with showed the distinction between the two. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised with the Bone Temple, not because I didn't think it would be that great, but I'm surprised because I didn't expect it to be as good as what it was. I didn't expect the intimate character-driven plot where we barely saw infected and focused on the rage virus and the desire for there to be a cure. The movie was pretty much carried by two actors that offered far more than what we got in the first one. It does show that when you have a great script and you give it to great actors that are able to basically act the hell out of it, you end up with a convincing story that you just don't want to end. It's now got me really excited for the final installment in the trilogy, and whilst this one is going to be difficult to do better than, I don't see why it can't be. So, there you have it, why 28 years later the Bone Temple is perfect.